Jolene.
Hello, everybody. Can you see my screen now?
Yes, looks
Okay,
great.
perfect. My name is Joelene Tamm. I'm the Natural Resources Director for the La Jolla Band of Luiseño Indians. I'm also a master's student at the University of California, Riverside, studying under Dr. Mark Hoddle. And I am also a Squaxin Island tribal member. Glad to be here today and so excited. So many people care about firewood. Today we're going to learn about how destructive forest pests such as the gold-spotted oak borer travel within firewood and create wildfire fuel. So, Agrilus auroguttatus, commonly known as the gold-spotted oak borer or GSOB for short, likely arrived during the 1990s from infested firewood from southeastern Arizona, from the Sky Islands of southeastern Arizona. It could not fly to California because there's no oak trees across the vast desert. So, um, in 2002, after the infested wood arrived, tree mortality started to become noticeable by the local residents. And then several years later, in 2008, GSOB was declared a primary pest which causes oak mortality in California. In Arizona, it's a secondary pest. Over the past 25 years, see, we have an estimated 200,000 oak trees, which is hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars in damage. But these 200,000 oak trees are spread across 6 counties. Ventura was recently added to the list. San Diego is well infested, as well as parts of Los Angeles, Orange, and San Bernardino and Riverside counties. As you can see, there are multiple infestation centers. These are called satellite infestations, and they are non-contiguous with um, the natural dispersal epicenter. So several of these infestation centers have also grown. Adult beetles are about the size of a grain of wild rice, about 10 by 2 millimeters. They are kind of bullet shaped that are more cylindrical than oval. They have gently tapered sides and they have flat heads. Their key identification feature is those 6 gold pubescent spots on the back of its wings. Um, they are a dark metallic iridescent color. They often appear black, brown. They can sometimes appear bronze, green, blue, or gold, depending on the light. And they are very, very small. To identify the larva, we're looking for little 20 millimeter flattened spaghetti-like worms that are hidden under the bark. They are typically found in the phloem to the cambium and sometimes the outer sapwood of the tree. They are less than 1 millimeter long when hatched, and then they grow to about 20 millimeters. The pupa shrink down again to that 10 millimeters that's typical of the adult beetle. Um, it's distinctly slender and flattened, resembling a piece of ribbon pasta. Uh, when they are fresh, they are yellow, but as they age, they turn yellow to light orange. And then each time, um, mm, I'm sorry, I just blanked out there. But one of their key features is the pincher-like appendage on the back of its tail region. They are called Urgomphi, and these are unique to Agrilus beetles. Um, well, they're unique to Agrilus and some other bee-breasted beetles. But in California, common lookalikes like the flat-headed apple borer don't have these pincher-like spines on the abdomen. GSOB typically go through 4 larval instars, and they get bigger each time until their last larval instar ends in complete metamorphosis, and then they turn into the adult beetle. Currently in California, there are 3 primary hosts for the gold-spotted oak borer. They are within the red section and the golden cup oak section of oaks. This includes the coast live oak, the black oak, and the canyon live oak. How does GSOB, a little tiny beetle, kill a large tree? It's the key mechanisms of injury are its annual attack causes cumulative damage and eventually system failure. When the GSOB feed on the phloem, it decreases the ability for the tree to transport food and nutrients within the tree. When the beetle feeds or the larva feeds on the cambium, it stops the tree from growing, and this prevents the tree from compartmentalizing the injury and decay, and it stops it from growing new layers of phloem and xylem. And when they damage the xylem, this inhibits the tree's ability to bring up water and nutrients. So all these 3 vascular injuries cumulatively cause tree mortality. So now we're going to talk about GSOB biology and detection. So generally, the noticeable spread of the gold-spotted oak borer is very slow, and research shows on using flight mills, which are little like flightometers. I don't think that's a word, but a meter that has one end tied glued to the GSOB lets the GSOB fly around in a circle until it can no longer fly. But it shows that GSOB can just fly a few miles over its lifetime. And this would make it impossible for GSOB to travel to San Diego unassisted. The gold-spotted oak borer has an annual life cycle. Beginning in the spring, eggs are laid. These typically hatch in about 10 days. The larvae hatch, and then they start to burrow into the tree. The larvae burrow straight to the cambium and begin feeding. They feed for about another 6 months or so, getting bigger and bigger until they start to migrate back out to the outer bark surface, where they build a pupal chamber and turn into this J-shaped larva. They begin to constrict down, and then they go through ecdysis, and their nice pupal form emerges. This form resembles the adult beetle, which takes about a month or 2 to develop into an adult. Several weeks or a month later, the beetle decides to wake up and chew its way out, and it feeds for about 2 weeks and to get enough nutrients for egg laying, and then it mates and lay eggs and start the cycle over and over again. So we don't have an official growing degree day model for GSOB, but many Agrilus beetles do, including emerald ash borer. So because insects are ectotherms, they can't produce their own heat. They need that external heat for development. They have to have a certain number of degrees before they can accumulate enough heat for growing. So based on other Agrilus models, emergence begins around 400 degree days and then peaks around 1,000 and sometimes starts to taper off for 2,000 for other Agrilus beetles. This allows us to predict the optimal timing for monitoring and insecticide treatments. Just wanted to note the growing degree days also coincides with other flowers on the East Coast, when the black locust tree blooms, emerald ash borers will start to emerge. So there are black locusts here, but I haven't quite noticed yet if they bloom when GSOB begins to emerge. So hopefully, as further research is completed, we will know more. But this is all preliminary analysis. So I threw up a sticky band trap that's typically used for spongy moth this year. And then I overlaid that with the growing degree days for San Diego County. So this shows that using a bell-shaped population curve, because I only started the trap mid-June, but many other of my fellow colleagues have reported emergence beginning as early as March. And this normal distribution curve kind of indicates that it would be complete possible for this to happen. And in March, we began about 500 growing degree days, which coincides with the emerald ash borer degree day models. So the latest emergence that I have observed on that sticky band trap was, or flight, the latest activity that I have observed on that sticky band trap was mid-September. So this gives us preliminary indicator that our growing degree days for peak emergence are going to be around 15 to 2,000 degree days. I'm sorry, 1,500 to 2,000 degree days. Oh, and I do want to note too that even though this is a degree day, preliminary degree day model for firewood or for a living tree, when we harvest firewood, the emergence will be sooner. So putting all this together, we know that adults start emerging around 400 to 500 growing degree days, and then they'll taper off. There's been one report of a GSOB emerging in November, or being caught in a flight intercept trap in November. So this is their active season, but they peak in June, July every year, and that seems to be fairly consistent over multiple studies. The egg laying happens after emergence. Towards the end, we're not sure exactly when GSOBs stop eating and mating. However, we know that the eggs are typically laid alongside emergence. Larval feeding occurs all year round. It does decrease in the summer, but I can still find large fourth instar larvae or third instar larvae during the summer, just not as many, and they're closer to the cambium layer. The larva and pupa can be found all year. The larvae can be found all year round. The pupa are mainly constricted to these warmer summer months. But of course, there has to be pupa before emergence begins. So we can expect that you can almost find a pupa any time of the year. So depending on the emergence and flight cycles of GSOB, you would want to do tree health surveys. We'll talk about those in a little bit. You want to do those in the winter time, and during the summertime, you can use flight intercept traps or other glue-based traps. And then you can pick up your exit hole counting and tree health surveys in November again. You would want to do the systemic insecticides before peak emergence system, and you want this to be done when the trees are actively growing, so they'll have good uptake, and you want it to be done during the warm weather where the tree is active. Contact insecticides have to be sprayed on the tree before peak emergence season, and this is kind of hard because it has to be done after the rains. And the winds, and the weather is generally not good here in April and May. Well, where'd I go? So grinding can be done all year round, but don't transport infested wood during flight season. Don't transport it out of the zone of infestation. If you do have to transport the wood a short distance, Try to do that during the winter months, which coincides with the lull in nesting bird season. So that's great for government projects because we can't do work during nesting bird season anyway. You want to enclose or screen wood all year round, but this is really critical during the summer months. And especially if maybe you're in Northern California and somebody is visiting from Southern California and they brought infested oak wood, you want to like enclose that wood right away so you can destroy it. And that is really critical. We know GSOB are in the area because of detection trapping. GSOB was originally identified through collections using branch beating. That's where you go and you take a stick and you beat it on the leaves and you catch what falls underneath. That's very hard to do and you've got to get really lucky. One lucky person at the University of Arizona collected a GSOB specimen using a UV light trap. GSOB are attracted to the light, but myself, I had not had luck doing this yet. Let's see, a few people have caught Goldspotted Oak Borer in a funnel trap, but GSOB are not attracted to any one attractant or volatile. So this also is very hard to collect GSOB. Sticky prism traps have historically been used, and these are like 3 by 5 foot traps that you coat in glue and you stick up, and they are not fun to deal with. But that's the historical recommendation. This year I tried that sticky spongy band trap, that sticky band trap. And the idea behind this trap is when GSOB emerge, they will crawl up and get stuck in the glue. Towards the later end of the season, I get more GSOB stuck in the middle of the trap. So I think in the early season, they're crawling, and then the later season, they are getting stuck from the blight from landing. I collected 50 beetles over 3 months on half of one tree using this method. So compared to the sticky band traps, which only catch about 20 or so traps during 20 or so beetles during a whole season, this will be my primary method moving forward. So how do we know our trees are infested and in decline before it looks like this? This is a nice composite image taken by, made by Ruth Wallen, called Walking with Oaks. We know to look for the signs of GSOB infestation. This includes looking for those nice, clear, crisp, D-shaped exit holes. If you stare at a tree long enough, you might even see a GSOB chewing its way out. Sometimes if you cut into a tree, you can see an adult in the pupal chamber. If you can tell, this wing is actually white. It's before that wing has undergone hardening. And then you'll often see the pupa or larva inside the pupal chamber or empty pupal chambers. They're very distinct, circular, and they have this kind of scarring going around outside of the pupal chamber. You'll also see larvae in the phloem, you'll see larvae in the cambium, and then you'll see these frass-filled galleries that don't have any clear discernible pattern. The symptoms of GSOB injury are that bark bleeding that accompanies any type of injury within a tree. So the bark bleeding alone does not indicate GSOB infestation, but once you get like 5 to 15 spots of bleeding and cracking, you know there's something seriously going wrong with that tree. Woodpeckers like to forage for GSOB, and this is different from their typical round, deep holes. These are just shallow forage marks, and you'll see the pupation chambers or galleries underneath. You'll start to see thinning crowns, and the thinning crowns are really evident because those twigs on the top that normally hold leaves, they will not have any leaves on them. Leaves or branches that are dying underneath that top canopy are completely normal. The GSOB thinning is those top little branches don't have leaves. But sometimes you'll see sudden crown death appear, and that's when the whole tree, the crown just turns brown all at once. It happens very rarely, but it does happen often enough that it's associated with GSOB injury. And you can always find lots of larvae in the tree right when the tree dies. And then you'll start to see tree mortality centers. Because GSOB is very lazy, it doesn't like to fly long distances, so it usually only flies a short distance where it finds food and friends and starts its life cycle again. So exit holes are a great way to count GSOB injury levels. When a tree is healthy, most of those exit holes are on the lower 2 meters. As the tree begins its decline, exit holes can be found further up the tree. So giraffes can see those exit holes in a dead tree very easily. Humans can see exit holes in a healthy tree very easily. We use exit holes to quantify injury. If a tree has less than 10 exit holes, it's lightly infested, any treatment method may be effective. If a tree has 10 to 25 exit holes, it's probably too late for any treatment. You're going to have to start thinking about cutting and removal or something. If a tree has more than 25 exit holes, not worth treatment. Um, and I've learned this over the years as I watched trees that had 10 to 25 or more exit holes, they die even if you apply insecticide. When you survey bark, this is actually your best indicator of tree health. The crown will sometimes sustain itself until the bark is all cracked. But if you have less than 5 areas of staining, the tree is probably going to respond well to insecticide treatment. If you have more areas of staining and the rating becomes a 2, if you have more than 10 areas of staining, you rate the tree as a 3, and when the tree is dead and the bark is cracked, it's rated as a 4. This helps you quantify your injury progression. So looking at those crowns, it's a great way to assess from a distance if a tree has injury. If the tree is nice and healthy, it's a good candidate for insecticide treatment. Once it starts thinning, it's probably not going to be such a good candidate for insecticide treatment. This thinning could happen slowly or it could happen really quickly. Some people will treat trees if they are just have moderate or light thinning, but once you get to moderate thinning, I wouldn't even attempt it. So when you decide to cut a tree or treat it, definitely if it's a hazard, dead or dying, or its bark is severely cracked, um, or if it has or doesn't have crown decline and the bark is cracked, I would go ahead and treat it if it's in a key area that's high traffic. Once you cut down those trees, you have to do the visual assessments to see what was going on inside this tree. In this image here, you can see this black line that kind of exists the entire distance between the bark and the sapwood. This is a layer of GSOB frass. The little ink spots, those are the native ambrosia beetles, but this tree was near a road and it only had a limited amount of time left in life. So the key to amplifier trees is really site dependent. Some people say that if a tree has more than 25 exit holes, it's an amplifier tree. But to clarify, an amplifier tree can sustain a lot of injury and can produce hundreds to thousands of beetles. Within coast live oak specifically, it has several layers, 2 to 3 layers of active xylem. So it is active all year round. It does slow down some in the winter time, but it is always moving nutrients and water throughout the tree. And it can put off thousands of beetles. Most trees only put off 100 beetles, but these amplifier trees, if you can cut those down and remove them and start to thin your heavily dense forested areas, that's always a good thing to do. If you have a tree that has 25 exit holes and you're deciding to cut or not to cut, having that 25 hole metric kind of gives you an idea of how long your trees are going to live. And then when to cut or treat is always dependent on funding, so you have to prioritize your hazard high traffic areas. So far, the best management practices for GSOB management that we know of. And let me go back to this picture here. So in my hand, you can see 3 pupa in those bark chips. And then if you put infested bark chips into a little cup, you'll actually see more beetles than those 3. They can pretty much stack themselves in really good within a highly infested tree. I can gather 100 larvae in a square foot. So they can become really dense once they find a great suitable habitat. So first thing first, don't move firewood. Limit as much as you can. There are many resources, including the Nature Conservancy. Our local landowners here put up this sign. I'm not sure how well it is. This is on a dirt road that hardly gets any traffic, but beetles can easily fly over the fence. So a sign like this might be good on a highway, but we need to focus our efforts. So the threat in a single piece of firewood. This 12-inch by 12-inch piece of firewood released, or I collected 28 beetles from this piece of firewood. Those 28 beetles, about 14 of those are females, and each female can lay up to 600 eggs. This gives us up to 8,500 eggs. If we only have a 1% survival rate, that means we have 32 to 84 new beetles. It's exponential. Its growth becomes exponential very quickly. We can spot high-risk firewood, not very well. If you look closely, you'll see this piece of firewood has an exit hole. I believe I collected about 10 beetles from this firewood, but I only had 1 exit hole when I cut the tree down. The oak wood, large limbs, or even the bark that falls off when you cut the tree, they can harbor GSOB for up to 2 years after cutting. So always assume the firewood is infested, whether it looks old or whether it looks fresh, and be suspicious even if you don't see exit holes. The key warning signs are the dark staining. In picture C, you see this dark staining between the phloem and the sapwood. You'll also see the scar tissue. There shouldn't be phloem on the other side of the sapwood. This is injury where the tree tried to grow over its injury. You'll also see these pupal chambers, the small circular little houses for the GSOB. You'll see them in the outer bark through the horizontal cuts or the vertical cuts. And then you'll see these spaghetti-like frass galleries, and these galleries have no patterns. So they are very discernible from other types of beetles. For reference, the size of a quarter can have many GSOB exit holes underneath it. How can we get rid of infested wood? We can chip it and we can grind it. Chipping whole trees with a tub grinder is very costly and difficult, but it can be done. You can chip smaller branches, and this helps reduce the fine flashy fuels and prepare a tree for harvesting. Be careful not to spread the chips more than 3 inches in depth, and don't transport the chips to uninfested areas. We can always contain infested wood. You can use heavy-duty plastic sheeting or tarps, at least 6 milliliters millimeters thick. And then you want them to be UV resistant. I recommend to fully screen your wood sheds with mesh aluminum. Typically, when I research, I use these polyvinyl mesh bags. I've learned if the GSOB have enough room to congregate, they do not want to chew out. They're happy as long as they have friends. But if you tightly wrap a log, they will chew out because they can get purchase on the vinyl. So if you can enclose your normal wood piles, this would help keep termites and stuff out of your home too. So highly recommendable. Even if you don't live in an infested area, start enclosing your firewood because you never know what's in it. I find so much cool stuff. Um, I also use these Husky waterproof tubs. I drill holes in them and then I insert aluminum screen into the gasket. This prevents beetles from escaping. If you collect firewood that you're not sure is infested, even in the small amounts, make sure to enclose it because people will confiscate firewood and then they'll pile it in their forest. That doesn't do any good at all. So we need to make sure that we're properly enclosing that wood if we're suspect of it. We can remove the bark. I've done this during my experiment. It's a lot of work, but it also reduces the amount of wood you have to handle. And then having the bark limits the amount of wood that you need to destroy. So, and it's also recommended that you remove the outer inch of sapwood as well. In a in a canyon live oak tree, which has thinner bark. The GSOB have been known to pupate in the outer sapwood, similar to emerald ash borer, but typically GSOB only pupate in the bark. It can be burned as well to get rid of it, or if you're going to bury it, which is also a lot of work, and you don't want to do that environmental compliance, but just be sure you bury it more than 12 inches deep. They can dig or eat their way through the soil, so they are very prone to escape if you don't take these protective measures. Since firewood should be seasoned anyway before burning, and GSOB's infestation, or because wood can be infested for up to 2 years with the gold-spotted oak borer, that corresponds nicely with the typical firewood seasoning process. You don't want to burn it for 2 years, but you want to make sure the wood is secured and labeled, and hopefully you can put it in a fully contained area, or sometimes we can't move all the infested wood. Leave that wood whole and put a notice on it not to move it and the date that it was cut down so we know when we can harvest it. If you start to split it and make piles, make sure your property is secure with gates and fences, because once you start to cut it up in pieces, people do like to transport it away from there. Thinning has not been proven effective for GSOB and needs to be researched, but thinning is typically used for all forest pests. The less dense habitat, the less insects can reproduce. We have had some preliminary success with it. This area, I'll show you in a later slide, it had 50% tree mortality and it seems to be coming back quite nicely. We took 300 trees out of 20 acres. It's a huge cut ratio, but the trees that do remain seem to be doing well. Let's see, pruning is not a cure for GSOB, but if you need a tree in an area to hold soil, start pruning those dying branches away so that replacement tree can start becoming adapted to light and wind. So how does GSOB affect the forests? Within those local infestations, it can get pretty bad pretty quickly. So the mortality spreads like dominoes. It begins when one dominant tree dies. This triggers the surrounding suppressed and codominant trees that aren't protected um, from, I'm sorry, this triggers the surrounding trees that don't have full shade protection from the sun. They are exposed to a lot more heat and weather, and they can not live very long after their main protector has died. Um, so sometimes the timeline to tree mortality is deceptive because an amplifier or brood tree can live up to 20 years. It can withstand so much injury. But once a tree starts to exhibit signs of decline, it typically dies within 3 to 5 years. We don't actually know when the first egg was laid, how long that tree takes to die. Here's a satellite image from the Forest Service in 2022 on Palomar Mountain. I've changed the color on this so you can see all the dead trees. This house is located about a half hour off the main rural road, so all these dead trees are probably still there. I don't want a wildfire to get in there, but I'm sure one day it will. Here, where we have access to that site that I mentioned earlier within the La Jolla Indian Campground, we have had 50% tree mortality from 2017 to 2024, but the site is actually looking very nice now. So just to the east of that site, we have the hillside, and you notice how close they are to the high voltage power lines. We had really heavy tree mortality on this site, but we got a whole bunch of our friends together and we decided to conduct a burn after years and years of permitting and plan writing. So we did the test burn, everything looked good. So they decided to ignite the whole hillside. They backed the fire down against the wind. You can see the power lines, smoke cleared the power lines by several hundred feet. So we're all good. State parks held the eastern line for us, made sure that the fire didn't spread into the ceanothus. And then after the burn, we had to shut it off about after 2 acres because fires happened around the county, but we were able to control that and turn it off when the fire chief deemed it necessary. So I just wanted to show this to show how we can start to implement these larger projects within this heavily fueled area. So we've been talking with our neighbors for 5, 6 years now, and finally, last year we were able to meet and we decided to start working together on our own towards the same goal. The Forest Service secured funding to remove about 1,400 trees. Caltrans secured funding to remove 87 trees. It costs a lot more for Caltrans to remove the trees because they have to shut down the road. And then we're hoping to get $2 million to secure our side of the fence. Caltrans has completed their environmental compliance and they have marked all the trees that they want cut. So if you drive by the highway, you'll see progress being made. This highway is a critical evacuation corridor for many residents in the county, and SDG&E's high voltage power lines also traverse the highway in this area. And this within 100 feet of either side of the highway, we have thousands and thousands of dead trees, and probably 100,000 dead trees on Palomar. It is critical fuel loading, which probably won't be addressed anytime soon. But if we get a fire, we want to make sure the highway is kept open and trees don't fall on motorists. Trees are continuing to die, and we're probably only about maybe 15% mortality right now. This area has not burned in 100 years along the highway, so its impacts are going to be very, very heavy. So we've been working towards this partnership. You can see many different property owners We have CAL FIRE, which is on county land. We have the Forest Service. We have Ray River Ranch and several independent property owners, and then the reservations to the west of this map. But this has taken a long time to get everybody invested in the project. Some of our neighbors to the west on the UC Dawson Reserve, they received a fuel abatement notice from the county. I went down there. I found GSOB. They only have a few dead trees, but this is going to take several $1,000,000 to address. So this GSOB impact due to the firewood transport has caused so many problems. So what are we doing about it? We got to learn more. So far, I'm finishing up some research on heat treatment. It's a promising solution to continue selling a usable wood product for the firewood vendors. If you heat wood until its core temperature is 60 degrees Celsius for 60 minutes, we have had 100% success in killing all GSOB emerged. Matter of fact, anytime we put it in the oven, emergence drops by like 60%. So hopefully we can finish up this research soon, and this shouldn't be any surprise. It's the standard treatment protocol for emerald ash borer. We've done pile burns. So we stacked infested rounds. We piled it with brush cut from the site all around. We set it ablaze, and then I had the firefighters put it out 7 minutes later, and then it smoldered for another 20 minutes. We put all this wood in crates alongside a couple crates of uninfested wood. I had a 96% reduction in GSOB emergence just from the outer bark charring. There was about 25 beetles that did emerge from the charred rounds, so it's not 100% effective. But once we start doing forestry projects, it's really important that we start reducing the beetle population so the surviving trees have a chance. We're working on studying the effects of cultural and prescribed fire on infested trees. Most of the trees on this hillside, I did not expect to live very long, and they're actually doing really well. So we'll see in the next few years if they succumb to their injuries, but I thought they'd be dead already, so that's hopeful. Thinning and prescribed fire have been both proven to increase forest health. So at a minimum, when we implement these burns within an infested area, we're at least going to improve the forest health levels so we can help mitigate those damages. And this research is based on the indigenous practices that utilized fire, ash, and smoke to harvest food because it was lethal for the insects. We're always looking for natural enemies. We found Bulca indica for the first time in California. We just published a paper, but the research is still out on if it's going to be an effective parasitoid. There are several other parasitoids, but none of these species has a noticeable effect on infested areas. Hopefully, we will continue to research and identify that forest or those species responsible for maintaining balance within GSOB infested areas. So, in conclusion, GSOB is a deadly invasive pest that causes widespread oak mortality. It has not killed any humans yet, but emerald ash borer is responsible for several deaths. So I believe it's only a matter of time before a tree falls and seriously injures a motorist. Trees have fallen on motorists at least 3 times, but no major injuries so far. So we need to be vigilant and detect infestations early. Proactive treatments can protect healthy or lightly infested trees, but are not effective on trees that are already showing moderate to severe damage. The best defense is the most effective and sustainable strategy, which is exclusion. Don't move firewood, and promote long-term forest health strategies. The path forward is using integrated pest management, which is essential to make responsible decisions and protect the environment. So we need to continue research to develop new tools and refine our strategies to help protect California's oak woodlands. And GSOB has been an unfortunate pest, but it's forced us to do what we should have been doing already. And hopefully we will develop the capacity and ability to take care of our forest. And thank you for your time. I can take questions now.
Thank you so much, Joelene. That was awesome. Yes, anyone who has questions, please put that into the Q&A feature here on Zoom. And while we're waiting, Joelene, did I hear you say that Goldspotted Oak Borer will emerge sooner if it's in firewood? How does that
Yes.
work? It's not able to feed as much, so it kind of like speeds up that process, or why is that the case?
When we harvest firewood, generally, if you harvest firewood anytime after December, most of the beetles or larvae have already eaten enough to where they're done eating. They're already in their pupal chambers and they're just undergoing metamorphosis. So once you cut that firewood and it starts drying out, it loses the great insulator that water is known to be. And then it can be warmed by the sun easier. So when I've previously harvested firewood within infested trees, within a few weeks, in early May, GSOB will start to peak emerge and really messes up the experiment. But something to be cognizant of when we're going out to harvest, that it's GSOB are just temperature dependent. There are no hard and fast rules about the timing for emergence. So whenever the wood is warmed, it's GSOB will be emerging sooner.
Okay, that's fascinating. I think that's important context because we're a national campaign, so saying things like keep firewood local, well, local in one area is different than local in a different area. Heat treated firewood is available in some places, not others. And then actually it's a suggestion in a lot of places to leave unused firewood there for the next camper rather than bring it home, which makes sense. You're trying to like limit more traveling, but that seems to be an argument for burn your firewood all like, as long as it's safe to do so, obviously, before leaving instead of just leaving it there. The nice thing maybe for the next camper, but it looks like that's a higher risk factor for this pest of it actually emerging. So
Absolutely, and all the other forest pests. You don't, when I see firewood in a campground, I don't know who left it there, where they got the firewood. So several other beetles could be in there, or the spongy moth, the Asian longhorn beetle. There's so many other insect pests that could be in that firewood, depending on where it came from. And all wood that campers usually bring has evidence that it had bugs in it. So
yeah.
you never know. Hopefully, we can change that message so people burn all their firewood and stop taking it to campgrounds.
Yeah. Okay, we have another question here. Great presentation. Sorry if I missed this, but is GSOB a threat or danger in other areas of the world?
Maybe. So within invasive insects, they are in their native area. They have evolved with key host organisms that can facilitate their life cycle. However, those key factors within the oaks, we're not entirely sure exactly what GSOB is looking for. So as it expands its infested areas, then it might find a new host that will support its life that we didn't know about it before, and it'll assimilate more hosts. So I believe GSOB is known to reproduce in at least 6 oak species right now. They're primarily within the Quercus section lobate, if I said that right. but they're also in the golden cup oaks as well. Um, Experiments have been shown that they can feed, the larva can feed in the cork oak, I believe, and another oak, the silk oak. But until GSOB assimilates that new host, we won't know for certain.
Nice. Okay. I have another question as we wait if anyone else from the audience has any more. You mentioned that when you go through the wood, you found some pretty cool stuff. Have you noticed, well, first of all, I want to know the coolest thing you found. And second of all, have you noticed any other non-native species to California in wood? Not maybe not necessarily an invasive species, but something that's not, shouldn't have been there, I guess.
Oh, yeah. I have not found another invasive species, but I'm still learning as well. If I can go back in my slide. Um, I think, well, the Bulca indica I found as it was ovipositing on a tree. So I had them cut down that tree and I collected 12 more Bulca indica. I thought that was pretty cool.
Nice.
Um, I love the blue shiny wasps that emerge, of course. I don't know exactly what their reproducing their host is. Um, I've collected several braconnid wasps. I've collected lots of Calisota elongata. I collected this unidentified Eupelmidae wasp. Um, and then this one here, the Phasgonophora sacculta, is so beautiful. I love its lobster-like um, back legs. And then these mites. These are chiletted mites. These are really cool. I would like to study them further, but during the late season, they start to overpopulate the wood in my research, and then they cause the beetles to die within a few weeks. So it's really opened my eyes up to the natural balance of the oak tree. All these different players, they have a job to do, and the oak tree is home to many insects and animals because they all bring something to that oak tree that has facilitated its survival. And diversity is the key to longevity.
Okay, nice. We have a couple more questions here. First off, is GSOB only invasive in California and Arizona? Is it a quarantine pest in the federal level or only in a few states? And is it native to Arizona?
The research has indicated that it was mostly native to Arizona. It needs further studies. The haplotype diversity closely resembled the Arizona population. And in Arizona, GSOB only causes tree mortality during droughts. It's only a secondary agent in mortality. And I believe it's probably because GSOB's really limited to the monsoon season emergence. During the hot, dry summers of Arizona, it's not very conductive for insect longevity. So that contrasts with our humidity here in California, which is nice for insects all year round. So in Arizona, it's not very invasive, although it has been found in Phoenix. So it's moving out of its historical native area into the lowlands. Um, but here in California, we've only identified it moving um, northward in California. If it continues to move, it'll hit the Sierra Nevadas and then all the way up to Oregon. We expect it can be established up in Oregon pretty well. There are no federal quarantines. APHIS only regulates pests that have been imported from other countries or will be exported to other countries. Since GSOB has only been found in the United States, they are not concerned. And I believe several people in California are working towards helping the state to develop firewood regulations. But as of yet, we do not have any firewood regulations except for researchers. Researchers need permits to move the infested wood, but people that don't know it's infested there's no legal recourse to stop them from transporting it.
Yeah. Okay, another one here. Hi, Jolene, great presentation. Thank you. For heat treatment, are you experimenting with kilns? Have you experimented with solar kilns?
So far I've only experimented with ovens. I do have the parts to build a solar kiln using the thermal tubes where the sun heats the tubes and there's oil run through the tubes. And we're going to run that through a radiator and hopefully have a solar wood kiln. Wood kilns aren't used for heat treating firewood in California at all, as there are several kilns that treat pallets. But as for firewood development, there are no other kilns. So developing a low-cost treatment method for firewood treatment is essential to help develop any industry for firewood producers.
Okay, and last question we have here. Have you been trying higher temperature for longer times as heat treatment?
I did try 71.1 degrees for 75 minutes. Uh, I did not get any emergence of any species. So that's the ideal temperature and duration. But anytime you heat wood, there's a cost and industry adoption. Having that lower cost for industry adoption is key to getting industry to develop it. But 71.1 degrees for 75 minutes, I believe kills fungi, which is also important because there's all sorts of bacteria and slime molds and fungi that we don't even know exists inside that wood. And having a cleaner product to transport and burn is better for everyone.
Okay, great. Well, we are at the hour and that is all our questions. So that kind of sums that up perfectly. Thank you again so much for your presentation, Jolene. I know I learned a lot and we were so lucky to have you with us today. So thank you. And thank you to everyone who joined. Again, the recording will be up on our webpage probably by tomorrow. And so anyone can find it there as well. Send it to your colleagues, send it to your friends. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Bye bye.